All right. Try to get as much as I can out of the chapter because you guys will probably see me like once, or twice or topic. So you're getting like the very condensed, very pushed together version of what is. All right. Okay. All right. Now, basically, we covered China last semester. We're coming back to China now because, Krista, are you not like on fire? I'm like dying. You got that hat on your. Oh, I'm just hot watching you. Okay. Anyway, now we're not going to cover the ancient dynasties because that was. So we're going to jump in here. I'm going to skip around because some of it was covered last semester. All right. Well, just to start out, originally the Chinese civilization. This is back in the time like ancient Egypt. They start between the two rivers. The Xi dynasty, which we're not really sure existed. We don't really have historical proof. It's all based on Chinese legend. Come on. Hello. All right. Now, we don't really know when they started, but we know that one thing happened that has been universal all the way until 1911, when the last dynasty happened. That you have a system set up. Now, you may have a local king, you may have a governor, but after the Qin dynasty, you have an emperor who controls everybody. Now, every once in a while, the emperor would go away. Now, if you remember from last semester, you talked about the mandate of heaven. As long as the emperor is acting in a good, just way, the heavens bless him with a good and prosperous rule. And when he doesn't, people rebel, bad things happen, earthquakes happen. Usually what happens was peasant uprisings, they'd take them out. So that's what happened. Now, unfortunately, if you're down here in the light orange down into the beach, life pretty much sucked because you were poor. There's very few wealthy people up on the top. If you're below the peasants, yeah, life's not good because artisans, if you are like somebody who made shoes, helmets like that, you were below a peasant. Merchants were not thought very well off, and the soldiers usually came from the peasant class. All right, we talked about the mandate of heaven already. Now, basically what happens is this. You have an emperor pop up. They rule, and within their family, that means it's a dynasty. So if I'm the emperor and I die and my daughter takes over. Now, China was one of the first countries to allow women to rule. So that's a big. They're not actually the first because Egypt did that. But China and Egypt, were so far away from each other. It was a distinctive difference from every other culture we've talked about because they allowed women to rule. The Empress Wu. The Han Dynasty is after the Qin Dynasty. And by the way, Qin Dynasty, even though it's spelled with a Q, that's where its name comes from. Qin, China. The Han Dynasty is the classical area. Again, this is in the ancient, so we're really not going to spend much time on this. But this is when one of the reasons they had the peasant uprising under the Qin Dynasty is because it was very corrupt. They started up an examination system that basically says to have a job in government, you have to be qualified to do the job in government, which is a crazy idea. But they've been doing it for over thousands of years, and it hasn't done well for them. Okay. Confucianism is not really a religion, it's actually belief that if you act well, there's the 5 pillars. If the ruler is good to the subject, if the father is good to the son, if the husband is good to the wife, if the brother is good to his younger brother, friend and friend, if all of these things are in harmony, this is where you get your yin and yang from. Everybody know what I'm talking about? The black and white thing. This keeps everything in harmony, everybody's healthy. It doesn't really matter about the mandate of heaven, but if you think about it, this works right in with the mandate of heaven. So, all right. Now, but as India grows, Buddhism starts to spread into India. And the funny thing is that Buddhism is actually more popular in China than in the country that it started in. After the Han Dynasty is when the Silk Road starts spreading. This is the road, trading roads that go into India and then all the way into Rome. And the Chinese make one thing that the rest of the world cannot make. Go ahead and close your Chromebook, guys. I need you to listen to me. I'm going to be done pretty quick, so you'll have time to work. They make silk, which nobody else in the world figured out how to make for over 2,000 years, so they're making all kinds of money off of this. Now, I already talked about the ruling families and dynasties. Yeah, we're way back again over there. Let's get this. Here's Qin, this is the first dynasty, the first confirmed dynasty. And by the way, I want you to know something. During the Qin dynasty, this is when they start building this, not the Great Wall of China, but a wall. When we get into the, there's the first emperor. He ends up, this guy thinks he's a god. He has the most elaborate crypt ever built. His tomb is literally miles and miles underground. He has all these fake soldiers set up to protect him in his death. They have underground rivers of mercury, so you can see it in the dark. There are fake stars put up, I forget what fluorescent material, but you can actually see down in there. The Chinese government's afraid to get too far in because they're afraid it's going to collapse. But he set up all the stuff that made China great to this day, and basically he did such a good job that Chinese culture didn't change for like 3,000 years. Now we get into the Han, you see this wall expanding, and you're going to understand why, because up here in this Gobi Desert, there's going to be somebody pop up who's going to change the world. We'll get back to him in a second. Now, the Han Dynasty, this is the second big dynasty. This is called the Golden Age. This is when Chinese writing gets uniform. Everything gets locked down and uniform. They, measurements, money, reading and writing. Language is not so much, because in China you still have 15 different dialects, but at least the alphabets are the same. Okay, Silk Road, I already said that when Silk Road began. This is all really, okay. Hang it on now. After the Han Dynasty, China falls into a port where you have little individual warlords, or you have a king or a governor. They were all fighting for control to take over after the Qin Dynasty. After the Han Dynasty. It doesn't come back until the Tang. They are able to reunite. Now they aren't able to get all of it because they lose parts of it, but they solidify the Silk Road. That's the important thing. They get it all the way into India and set up great commerce. This starts the second golden age, and it goes from one dynasty into another. Instead of just selling stuff, now they start trading with the West, getting ideas back in. Now, they're getting very fearful of the Manchurians up here, also the Mongolians. That's going to be the ones who get them first. Now, during the Tang Dynasty, this is when gunpowder is invented. They also invent the compass. Anybody ever used a compass, a real compass? What does it point to? Are you sure? In our country, it points to north. If you ever have a compass, it points to a thing called magnetic north. If you're looking at a map of the United States, above the United States, in Canada, there's a big magnetic field in Canada. It's like right above Niagara Falls. All compasses point there. Just FYI, don't find this out the hard way. If you have a compass, it's not good in every place in the world. If you move around country-wise, you need to get a new compass, because you will get lost during the night. Because you think it's pointing north, and you might be pointing west or the east. They also developed, I'll get back to this in a minute because that's important. They also developed movable type printing presses. In the Han Dynasty, they invented paper. So they do a lot of things. They're the first people to figure out vaccines. Thank God for these people, right? Because smallpox wasn't an issue because they figured out if somebody had smallpox, now you wouldn't want to be vaccinated the way they were vaccinated because it sucked. It had like this big, you ever see those fat butter knives where you like spread like cream cheese? It had that, but they had a big hook on it. So what they would do is they'd go up to somebody who had smallpox, bust open one of the sores on them, take half of that out, and then they'd come over to you and then cut into a vein of yours and stick that in it. So you take the shot and gun out, it's gotten a lot better. And you wouldn't end up like this poor guy. Okay, the Yun Dynasty. The Yun Dynasty isn't really a dynasty. The Mongols. And by the way, when you're doing your assignments this week, you're going to notice that you are watching a movie. Questions are pretty easy. And by the way, the documentary, even though it's a documentary, it's a really good documentary. It's got actors and stuff, and it's not people just talking. It's on Genghis Khan, the most unbelievably powerful person that probably has ever lived. Because if you see this empire, which is bigger than the Roman Empire, which is bigger than Alexander the Great's empire, it's bigger than any empire we've ever talked about. All of this is conquered in 20 years. It took Rome thousands of years to get as big as it did. It took China tons of years. These guys were awesome. Now, and it's amazing because Genghis Khan, the guy who sets all this up, he was illiterate. He was born poor. He was orphaned shortly after that. And he rises up, takes control of, if he didn't die, he would have taken over all of Europe and then probably started heading down towards Africa. A little bit on Genghis Khan. This guy is born to a noble, a poor noble, who's like a little chieftain. And early in his life, he experienced this tragedy because he's out with his dad one day, and this other tribe comes roaring in, and the first thing they do is they go get the tribal chief, and they cut his head off. Genghis Khan probably would have been killed, but he fell off his horse, and they thought he was already dead, so they let him go. Not only do they kill his dad, they take his mom as a prisoner, and he has nowhere to go. So he goes and lives with his uncle for a little while. His mom somehow figures out how to get free. He and his little brother and his older brother were all out searching for food. This will tell you a lot about Genghis Khan right here. His older brother goes and finds some food and doesn't share it with the rest of the family because they're starving. Genghis Khan takes out a bow and arrow and kills his brother because he wouldn't share food. So it gives you an idea of how ruthless this guy is going to end up being. He goes and lives with his cousin and his uncle. He becomes blood brothers with his cousin, this guy by the name of Jamukar. These guys become warlords. Genghis Khan develops a new form of fighting that is unseen anywhere in the world. Instead of having a whole bunch of guys line up like the Greeks and Romans and march at each other and try to knock each other down with their big spears, he's like, screw all that. Let's get horses. Let's learn how to shoot our bow and arrows while we're riding, let's get these real light swords, come up and just slaughter people real fast. And if we start to lose, we right away. Crazy idea. He trained his soldiers that while in a full gallop, they could pull out an arrow, shoot an arrow from 50 yards away through a target this big. That's how they train. So when he gets, the first thing he does is when he gets power, he goes and finds that tribe that killed his dad. He wipes them out. He realizes that he has great potential as a leader, and when his uncle dies, his uncle names him heir instead of his own son, which is going to kind of come back later on to be a problem. And he starts spreading out, and his empire spreads quickly. Now, you got the Great Wall of China, which was built to keep northerners out. You got this big, huge wall that you can see from outer space. How do you think he solved that problem? What?
You can't see.
The bases you can. Yeah. Okay. The actual wall, no. But like, there were military installments along the way, and they're so big that you can actually see them. And they're high and top. Because my dad, because I told that to my dad actually went and saw it. And he said, well, you haven't seen this big military campus. It's like this big military base on the top of a mountain. Yeah, he's got a good friend who lives in China, so we hung out with him. Yeah. He said it was amazing. He said it's literally wide, it's wider, twice as wide as this. And the reason that you can see some parts of it from outer space is that it's so high up in the mountains that you're actually above, like where the clouds are. Yeah. You need a really, really clear day, but yeah. But you also have to understand what satellites now. You can see your shoelaces with you got the military, so yeah. It's all okay. Needless to say, his empire starts spreading. Now, Genghis Khan is different from every other ruler we've talked about because he doesn't really care about being rich. He doesn't really care about ruling. Whatever he does when he goes and conquers somebody, he shares all the money with the people who are his army. So his military guys think he's awesome. He shares with the if there's a widow, like if somebody gets killed in battle, they make sure they take care of his family. It's the happiest that people could be. Now, the first time that somebody actually challenges authority is his blood brother Jamukar. He tries 3 different times to take him out. And every time Genghis Khan, who's considered to be one of the most brutal people on the face of the planet, he keeps forgiving this guy until his wife basically says, look, he's gonna keep coming at you until he kills you. You need to kill him. He says, I can't, that's my brother, that's my brother. And Jamukar, his brother, even says, well, he's being held, because what happens is one time he comes and tries to buy out Genghis Khan's generals. Genghis Khan takes the generals and he puts them in a pot of oil and slowly heats them up and then boils them to death. That's got to be a brutal way to go. And of course, he gives Jamukar a pass. And Jamukar tells him while he's watching his generals being boiled, yeah, I'm going to come after you again. He says, either give me an honorable death and let me go and let me come after you again. So they actually put Jamukar down on his knees. They have this big pile of sticks that are like roped together, and they just break his back, because I don't know why that's an honorable death, but that's how they would kill people. They just pushed him back until his back broke. So then he's dead, and then once he got rid of that problem, that's when they start going all over the place. Now, here's the cool thing about Genghis Khan. If you surrender, he was totally nice to you. He would even let you keep your king. He said, okay, we get that here to Persia. Well, not Persia, I don't want to use that because that's a bad example, because he devastates them. So he gets over here to parts of Russia. Yeah, you can keep your little king. That king just answers to me, and you got to pay me taxes. Other than that, we're all good. China figured out the hard way. First of all, they thought, okay, we got the Great Wall of China. You're not coming around us. He just went around it. He took his troops to the mountains, came up, and they were so freaked out. Now, by this time, Genghis Khan had a reputation. Everybody feared him. The generals rode out like they're going to go fight him. and then they fall down on their knees and say, hey, if you let us join us, we'll fight for you. We don't want to fight you. We don't want to die, so we'll join your side if you don't kill us. They're out. He's like, cool. Tell me about your city so I know how to get in them. And then he was able to take the cities in no time at all. Persia's the nasty story. Persia thought they were all that because the Persian Empire was too far away, hadn't been gone for too long. And they thought, hey, we're going to show this guy what a real empire is. And Genghis Khan would do the same thing every time. He'd send a diplomat out and say, hey, here's what we are. You surrender, play nice, we won't destroy you. Now, a lot of people would say, no, we're going to fight you, and they'd go on. So Genghis Khan, but even if they surrendered at any time, Genghis Khan was nice. The Persian Sultan thought he was all that, so he takes this diplomat, cuts his head off, puts it in a box, and says to Genghis Khan, this is what I think of your offer of peace. You will have to destroy us. So that's what Genghis Khan did. He was so pissed. He not only killed every soldier, he killed every man, woman, and child. He was so mad that anywhere they could grow crops, he had them not only drop salt on them so they couldn't grow, he had them pound it into the ground so nothing grew there for years. Genghis Khan killed so many people that the CO2 levels on the earth went down drastically. Historians know exactly when he existed because the CO2 levels consistently dropped for his 60-year lifespan and then went back up. Hitler and Stalin can't even claim that. This is the only guy that ever, okay, Napoleon, Hitler, Alexander the Great all tried to take Russia in wintertime, all of them failed. The only guy who succeeded was Genghis Khan. That's why this is my favorite meme up here. It says, Genghis Khan, give up, you're screwed. Okay. You're going to watch a movie, I'm going to talk more about him. But basically, that's what you would see. You just see massive amounts of horsemen riding up on you, and you're just like, I would do like the Chinese generals doing. Okay. I give up. Now, because he comes into areas and people, once they were conquered, were afraid to get killed again, it creates an incredibly peaceful area because he is a benevolent ruler. He is a very kind ruler once you surrender. You're not so much. But, and this is awesome for business because the Silk Road now is completely protected. You don't have to worry about people stealing stuff. Trade goes through the roof. Now, unfortunately, we don't really know why. The movie makes a guess at it. They make it sound like, we don't really know why he died. He just got sick and died as a very young man. And right after he dies, a couple of his sons take over. It's not until his grandson, Kublai Khan, takes over that things get solidified. But after his death, the empire fades. This empire doesn't really even last a couple of 100 years. It was all based on the power of one man. From the time he dies, it starts to fall apart. During this time, though, this is when Marco Polo, the Italian, if you've ever been in a pool, played a stupid game, Marco Polo, that's this guy. He visits during the Yuan Dynasty. He writes a book talking about all the great things of all the things he taught Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan. The history of the Mongols don't say anything about him, so we don't know if he was just making stuff up or full of crap. Now, after Kublai Khan dies, the empire falls apart. The Ming now take over. This is the actual Chinese dynasty, so the Chinese are back in control. They rule for a while, they expand the wall. They start trading with areas like Vietnam, Korea. They colonize Japan. This is when we have Zheng He, who's the great sailor long before Columbus ever sailed to America, before the Vikings sailed to America. This guy sails all the way around into Africa. He also goes to South America and North America long before any Europeans did. Yeah. They once, it's kind of weird because the Chinese get there and there were people there, but they like cultivate them because you'll see Japanese and Chinese cultures are very similar. But then once they lost power, now that's the funny thing. That's the one place that Genghis Khan could not take. Have you ever heard of kamikaze? What kamikaze is a divine wind. That's what they called those pilots that fought during World War II. Genghis Khan only fought on land. So the first time he wants to go attack China, he's never been on a boat and tried to take his men. He just sends his first wave of men there. This big like typhoon sweeps up and just wipes out his men. He's like, screw it, not doing it. So that's how the Japanese were saved. And they pretty much, because they're on an island, they are safe from everybody. It's not until like like a little bit before World War I, that the Chinese start messing with them again. Yeah. Successfully. They start trading too. Right. And the Japanese, China becomes very isolated. Japan's even worse. They don't really trust anybody. But we'll get there because we're okay. Now, just to give you an idea how Zheng He was able to sail around the world so easily, this would be the Santa Maria, Columbus's flagship, this little thing here. This is Zheng He's one of his ships. Not only did he have a better sailing ship, if they got stuck, they could row the ship. They had the big things you stick out because he took 100 slaves with him. During this dynasty, there's also when the Forbidden City was built. This is a really cool thing because Chinese emperors were considered to be godlike. In this city, now here's the surrounding city. Now, the only people who are allowed to live in there are people who are servants of the emperor. Inside the canal is this big, looks like a farm here. That is his palace. And only workers could come and stay there. Now, he was fearful because one of his descendants had been killed off in a test uprising. So he had the canals, everything's. If you were caught on his land without his distinct permission, you were not only tortured, your whole family was killed. Workers had to get permission each day to come in to service the emperor. China started to expand. If you notice, the Mongols are completely gone because now the Russian Empire. Now this is the Qing where we're. This is the second. Well, it's the Qi and the Qing, so it's whatever. Mongolia is gone. You now have the Russians. You now have the Chinese. And they lose out. The Northerners right here in Manchuria come down and take over. They're kind of like the Mongols, except not as tough. They take over, wipe out the Qin. So this is the second time you have a Manchu dynasty, foreigners who are ruling the empire. Not only do they take China, they take Mongolia, Tibet. Now, Kangxi ends up taking on Chinese culture, like Kublai Khan did. He offers the Chinese respect and peace. They end up liking him. They stay in and actually lowers taxes, which everybody likes, and becomes actually quite popular with the native Chinese. Okay. Okay. All right, Japan, and we're jumping over here. We're gonna go through this real quick. Japan was a lot like ancient Greece. It's an island that's real mountainous, so you can't really grow anything. So they're gonna turn to the sea to find the majority of the food. If you notice the big difference between Chinese and Japanese food, yes, sir. Okay. We can't have it all. We're gonna try to mix block like sea. Yeah, that won't. It'd be a perfect. So if you notice the difference between Chinese and Japanese food, Chinese food is more vegetables. Japanese food is more meat. Now, not a fan of the raw fish. Or when they cook it up, all of it. I'm not. My wife loves sushi. It creeps me out. Okay. Now, we already told you about the kamikaze and the divine winds protecting the Japanese from Genghis Khan. You borrow a lot of cultural ideas. What you're going to notice is that they are greatly affected by China. Now, the one thing that doesn't transfer that is unique to China is the Shintoism. It's a worshiping of nature and ancestors. It's not like any other religion that we've talked about so far. It's kind of hard to explain. But you go to a temple and basically you get yourself in balance. It's kind of yin and yang. You worship your ancestors. Like in your house, you will have a shrine to your ancestors. Krista, go ahead and close that, please. This is the symbol of Shintoism. You'll see it all over Japan. Okay. If you look at the divine kami, you see the kamikaze in here. So, again, another Shinto. That's up on Mount Fuji, up above the clouds. Sun goddess. All right. They adapt the idea of the emperor. However, here's the weird thing. Where the emperor is incredibly powerful in China, they are very weak. And we'll get into why they are very weak in a minute. In Japan, the emperors are weak.
Yeah, in Japan was the rain.
Right. It was always the dynamo and the warlords. Like in World War II, the last emperor, at the end of the war, like when we took over all the other enemies of World War II, we took out their leaders. They left the emperor alone because they knew he really had no power. It was actually Hirohito they were going after. Well, actually, he lasted for a long time. He was a young man during World War II. He just died like in the late 90s. Okay. They took the idea of you had to be good at your job to actually hold a government job. Buddhism comes over, Chinese writing and art. If you look at the two architectures, it's a little different, but not much. You look at the writing, those are the same words. I mean, down below looks a little bit more of the top one than looking at that light, but they are similar. So a lot of culture stealing. Shintoism and Buddhism kind of blend. Buddhists from Japan and Chinese Buddhists do not get along, just FYI. This is where Zen Buddhism comes from. Let's skip ahead. But basically, know that there's a bunch of little families, and this is why the emperor is not powerful, because you have all these powerful families. This is where our warlords are going to come from. Now, okay, here we go. The best way to understand Japan is to think in Europe. Remember how we had the knights, the lords, and all that stuff? Same thing. Now, it's weird that two places can grow up and do almost the exact same thing without any contact. Because you got peasants, you got the peasants down here. You got the knights, you have what's called the samurai. Now, if I had to choose between one of the two, I'd rather be the samurai because they're much more lethal warriors. These are the guys who invented karate. Not only were they warriors, they didn't need weapons to fight. Then above them, you have the Daimyo, where this is what Emperor Hirohito, I'm not sorry, this is what Hideki Tojo was. And then you have the Emperor up above who really, all right. Now, the European knight, they entered the code of honor, you know, like we were a gentleman, like if there's a lady crossing, you put down your coat, let the lady walk over. You didn't fight unless you're provoked. A lot of the same stuff that went here. Matter of fact, the samurai were so strict in their fighting code, like even if you wanted, like, say I'm a full trained samurai, you're just a little peasant guy, and you come after me, I know you can't fight with me because I'll kill you. So I would still turn away because it would be a dishonorable kill. Whereas the knight probably would have killed you, the samurai would leave you alone. The samurai code was so strict, they actually started to train something, I know you're going to know the name when you hear it, ninjas. Ninjas are trained assassins who did the dirty work of the samurai that they were not allowed to do. Which doesn't really make sense because if you believe in the samurai code, you're going to turn around and hire ninjas to do the things you can't do. Whatever. Okay. So, okay, we got the feudal system. We already explained that. The warlords come from the Daimyo. Where said that? Now, if you were a really good warrior, a samurai, you rose through the ranks, you became a Ronin. Ronin would become the warlords, the Daimyo. These are basically your generals. Now, generals weren't about how smart you were about the enemy. Generals are how good you fought. The best fighters became generals. It wasn't political. It was based on your conquests. Loyalty and honor is everything. A samurai carried a little sword like this. If they did something dishonorable, instead of being dishonorable, they would kill themselves. They would stab themselves in the chest. There's actually two ways to die. If somebody else kills you, either one are very great deaths. Either like one of the ways you just go right through it straight up into your heart. If we're both samurai and I do something dishonorable, I would ask you to give me honorable death. You would do one of to completely cut my head off. I'd come up here and take that sword like right through your collar and go straight down into your heart line, which is an excruciating way to die. In this time period, this is also when gunpowder had been invented, so the samurai used firearms also. That was the only thing that ever freaked out Genghis Khan, by the way, when the Chinese invented fireworks. Genghis Khan's coming over the thing, all of a sudden they start sending these big fireworks off of him. That freaked him out a little bit. But then when he figured out he couldn't be hurt, then he was just pissed off. Okay, so unlike the European model where the king is at the top, you got the emperor at the top, but really, of the dynamic of the shogun, the top Ronin is really the ruler of the country. He basically is like the Queen of England, where he just waves in the parade. He doesn't do anything. Basically the same thing. Military, do we have to talk about that? All right. Okay, we are done. You may work on your stuff. Any questions out there virtually, or you can write them out?